As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin is believed to be dead following the crash of a private jet in Russia's Tver Oblast. So Russian authorities told the media that Prigozhin was listed as a passenger of the plane and that all 10 people who were on board were killed in the crash. Russia's emergency ministry told TASS that the plane was flying from Moscow headed to St. Petersburg. Russia's Federal Air Transport Agency said, quote, an investigation of the Embraer plane crash that happened in the Tver region this evening was initiated. According to the passenger list, first and last name of Yevgeny Prigozhin was included in this list, end quote. So there's a video circulating on social media that appears to show a plane falling from the sky. Well, it does show a plane falling from the sky, and they're saying that this is the video of this plane. And, you know, it's not just on Twitter and Telegram. It's also been posted on Russian media websites and stuff. So it's possible that this is it. And, you know, you could see this plane just drop. And there's another video that apparently they say shows the aftermath. And looking at it, you know, it doesn't look like anybody could have survived this crash. It's a pretty devastating scene. So, you know, definitely doesn't seem like there's any survivors. So National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Tuesday that the U.S. has expressed to Ukraine and European allies that Congress will back the new spending on the war in Ukraine that President Biden has requested, despite dissonant voices among Republicans. So an ambassador from a European country confirmed to Axios that his government had received this message from the U.S. in recent days. Sullivan noted in his comments that there are still strong voices in leadership positions in the Republican Party in Congress who favor continuing to fund the proxy war against Russia. And I think he's right, unfortunately. But what's interesting here is that a House GOP leadership aide told Axios that the new Ukraine spending would likely pass if brought to a vote, which I think that's, you know, certain. I think, you know, every Democrat would probably vote for it and enough Republicans would vote for it. But this aide is saying that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy might have difficulty bringing it to the floor for a vote due to growing opposition. And I'm not sure, I got to ask people that are more familiar with this exactly how the legislative procedures work, but I know that there are powers that Republicans have that they could block things from being brought to the floor. I don't know if they could block it outright, or I know they could definitely delay things for a while and make it difficult. So, you know, we might see that, and I think that's good at least. So this aide said, quote, I just don't see that support in the House Republican conference now. We are well beyond just the Freedom Caucus talking about this, end quote. So the Chinese Coast Guard said on Tuesday it allowed Philippine vessels to resupply a grounded Philippine warship on 2nd Thomas Shoal, which is a reef in the disputed Spratly Islands of the South China Sea. So a spokesman for the Chinese Coast Guard said that a temporary special arrangement was allowed because the Philippine vessels were not carrying illegal construction materials. He said that before allowing the Philippine vessels to resupply the BRP Sierra, that the Chinese Coast Guard issued a stern warning. So the Philippines grounded this ship, and that's the name of it, the BRP Sierra Madre. They grounded it on 2nd Thomas Shoal in 1999 to assert its claims, and they use a vessel as a base of operations. China had been blocking the resupply missions. There was an incident 3 weeks ago where China fired a water cannon. Manila rejected China's framing of the incident that occurred near the disputed shoal on Tuesday. They said that they managed to supply the ship despite harassment from Chinese vessels. Another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So the BRICS summit is this week, and BRICS nations announced their intention to expand their group during a summit in South Africa. China seeks to grow BRICS to be a peer with the Group of Seven, the G7. So speaking at the summit in South Africa on Wednesday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi signaled that BRICS was prepared to add new members. And this is a big deal because BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, India is kind of different than, you know, what they have different ideas than what China does. And there were rumors and reports saying that India did not want to expand BRICS because India is also trying to, you know, expand ties with the U.S. They're kind of playing both sides. But now they're saying that they agreed to expand it, and all the other leaders agreed with that. So this is significant, and Brazil says that they want to bring Argentina in. That's a country that they're eyeing to bring into this. And they also say that they're going to increase trade with each other's, with their own currencies. So they're eyeing de-dollarization, which of course is a threat to, you know, the U.S. grip on the global financial and economic system, and just a threat to U.S. Global dominance in general. So this is, of course, all accelerating, in the wake of the invasion, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the Western sanctions, the U.S. and Western sanctions that have followed, and just sanctions in general. In recent years, the U.S. has just been sanctioned crazy, and all these countries that are being targeted with sanctions naturally will increase cooperation. And again, India is a very interesting case, because if you remember at the beginning of the war, they weren't going along with the sanctions. They're buying a ton of Russian oil now, and there was some threats. U.S. officials were threatening sanctions on India, but they realized, India is too important in their strategy against China, so they backed down. So they're kind of letting India do what they want. India buys a lot of Russian weapons because they want them as an ally against China. And then you have China and India are both in BRICS. So again, it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. Donald Trump he privately met with his top economic advisors last week and discussed plans for major tariff increases. 3 people familiar with the matter told the Washington Post. So one of the ideas which was floated involves a universal baseline tariff on nearly all imports to the U.S., which may be as high as 10%. So that's pretty big. The current baseline is around 3%. China's tariffs, the ones that Trump imposed that Biden has kept on, most of them face an average duty of around 19%. So in general, he wants to increase tariffs across the board. And
here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
Nothing is more destructive of human decency. Nothing is less fruitful in seeking truth. Nothing is more totalitarian, and nothing so undermines the government's own case as its use of torture. Oh, you're talking about those dirty commies over there in Russia and China, those people that torture people, whoever they want, for whatever reason? Why, those dirty commies? We should destroy them.
Of course, I'm talking about the American CIA and the American military torturing people at so-called black sites in Thailand, Afghanistan, Poland, and at the United States Naval Base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, which came to a head last week when a military judge did the unthinkable to the military and suppressed confessions that were given during and after torture. This is the first time the government has suffered a setback of this magnitude in 20 years at Guantanamo Bay. Second thing that happened last week was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11, as to whose guilt there is ample evidence, but who was tortured 183 times in 6 months. After his lawyers announced to the court that they were going to call his now retired CIA torturers to the witness stand to describe what they did to him, the prosecutor said, "You really want this stuff out there? We can't defend it. Lawyers are not ethically permitted to defend torture." So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who arguably organized the murder of 3,000 Americans, escapes the death penalty and escapes the bowels of Florence, Colorado. That's the American government's supermax, and is now negotiating for a guilty plea with the creature comforts in an above-ground jail. So you have 2 major setbacks. Why? Because the government shot itself in the foot by torturing. It didn't need to torture Nashiri, the guy who allegedly bombed the USS Cole that killed 17,000 people. That's the confessions that were suppressed. And it didn't need to torture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But because it tortured both, in one case now they have no evidence out of his mouth with which to prosecute him. In the case of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, notwithstanding a mountain of evidence, literally a mountain of evidence, they're afraid to prosecute him because they don't want the American government to be exposed for what it truly is. So Joe Biden, and this is not Biden's fault, this just happened on his watch. The torture occurred on George W.'s watch. Joe Biden has authorized plea negotiations between the government and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Did you see either of those on the front page of the New York Times or on Fox News?
No. This is the George Bush that said we got to invade Afghanistan because we got to get that guy Osama bin Laden, quote, dead or alive.
Correct. And this is the same George Bush who in an unguarded moment said, well, we have to get Saddam Hussein because, quote, he tried to kill my daddy, close quote, which is true. He did try and kill President George H.W. Bush. That's hardly a reason for invading the country. A sickened individual who added trillions to debt, who slaughtered close to 1 million people in the 2 wars, who boasted about the Patriot Act, assaulting our civil liberties, arguably the worst president in the post-World War II era.
What you just said about him, how many people did he murder?
Well, close to 1 million people died between the Afghan war. We were there for 20 years. We accomplished nothing but destroying a society. and the invasion of Iraq, which we effectively destroyed. Close to 1 million human beings died, not Americans. Only about 6,000 or 7,000 Americans died.
So people get angry at me because they don't like my language. They don't like when I get angry. Why don't you calm down, Salenti, and stop calling these people these names that you call them, because you are being, we don't like your language. Oh, yeah. And you don't like my attitude, but you bend over and suck the crap spewing out of the mouth of these murderers. Oh, and they're elevated by the media. Oh, yeah. Oh, why don't you buy some of little Georgie Bush's paintings? This is disgusting what's happened to this country. And what you write here, about, one of my lines is, first of all, you said that the black sites, you called them, right?
Yes.
That's being racist. How dare you call them black sites? Right. Let's really be stupid about this. So let's staying on the stupid level. I'm sick and tired of hearing this crap that if only women were in charge, there would be no war. And you write about this woman in the CIA about torture?
Gina Haspel, nicknamed by her colleagues, not her victims, by her colleagues, Bloody Gina, who gloried in the torture, who personally supervised the torture of al-Nashiri, and who wrote about it in graphic detail, which was inadvertently revealed by a super honest FBI agent who didn't know what she was doing, I guess, inadvertently revealed this stuff in open court. And that's how we all got our hands on it. And she eventually became the director of the CIA under Donald Trump.
Yeah.
No, these people are never punished. Madeleine Albright went to her grave comfortable and confident in repeating the monstrosities that she uttered about the value of the slaughter of innocents. I mean, Bill Clinton famously bombed a pharmaceutical factory within hours of his public interrogation before a grand jury in order to get the public's attention off the interrogation of the grand jury. And people got killed. Obviously, people were working in the factory in Kosovo, but nobody gets punished for that, Gerald.
No.
The Peter Schiff Show.
And I've been talking about the fact that we've been in a manufacturing recession for a long time. And that's where Joe Biden and Donald Trump have something in common, because both presidents lied about the true state of manufacturing. President Trump claimed that he revitalized manufacturing and made America great again by restoring our manufacturing prowess. And now Joe Biden is telling the same lie, that we're having this renaissance in manufacturing, that it's booming. And both presidents were being dishonest. Manufacturing was deteriorating under both of their presidencies, and it continues as we become more and more reliant on imports. It's the foreign factories that are producing the stuff that we consume, not the American factories. And so as soon as that weaker than expected data came out, the bond market rallied. Now, why did the bond market rally? Well, the economy is weak. Well, we already know that. But this weak economic data comes out, and traders buy bonds because that's what they've been programmed to do. It's like Pavlov and the dog, right? They salivate at these numbers. And they react. The idea is, the economy is weaker. The Fed doesn't have to hike as much. The Fed might have to cut. Well, how many times are you going to react to the same data set? But we got it, and bonds were on the lows. I mean, they had been beaten up pretty bad. So I'm sure some of the longs, or the shorts rather, in the bond market decided to take some profits, and that's probably what kind of drove the movement. But the theory is wrong. And I've been discussing that on this podcast. A weak economy is not good for bonds. The idea is that it just means that the Fed is going to be easier, but that just means that inflation is going to be stronger. The real enemy of bonds is inflation, especially U.S. Treasuries, where it's not really default that is your risk, but devaluation, depreciation. Inflation is what drives down the value of the dollar, and that drives down the value of bonds. Again, too much money chasing too few goods, that's what causes prices to go up. Well, if manufacturing is going down, what does that tell you about the supply of goods? Well, it's going down too, or not going up as much as we need it. So you're shrinking the goods that are available to be bought. That means goods prices should go up. At the same time, if the economy really is weakening, the government is ultimately going to run bigger deficits. The Fed's going to have to monetize those deficits. I mean, they're not going to have to, but they will, because if they don't, well, everything's going to collapse. And so we already know that given the choice between allowing a financial crisis or any kind of crisis to happen or printing money, that's what they're going to do. They're going to print money. They're going to create inflation because they think that's the lesser of the two evils, and they have the ability to use that as their kind of, get out of jail free card, except it's not free. It's actually very expensive, but that's what these politicians do. And so a weakening economy leads to bigger deficits. It leads to ultimately a weaker dollar and, more money printing. And you have more people who are unemployed and not being productive, but taking their unemployment checks or their savings and trying to buy goods and services that they don't help create or produce. And you have more money chasing fewer goods. And so this is inflationary. But in the short run, the markets don't get that. So you got the rally in the bond market. And that kind of was like a domino. Gold rallied about $20. Again, why? Oh, weak economy means the Fed can cut rates. They think that's bullish for gold. Gold went up. What's bullish for gold is the inflation. That's why this number was bullish for gold, because it means more inflation, not less. It should have been bearish for bonds too, but the bond traders don't get that. But gold was up about $20. In fact, it's up another $5 or so this evening as I'm doing this podcast. We're now at about 1,920. So we were below 1,900 this morning. And so now we're back above that level. Again, I've been saying on this podcast, that's the support. Anything below 1,900 is a pretty strong buy. So far, anything near 2,000 has been a pretty good sell. But I think eventually it's the resistance at 2,000 that's going to give way, not the support at 1,900. In fact, I think the support is getting stronger as the resistance overhead is getting weaker. So the gold market went up. Dollar, didn't really make much of a move today. A little bit surprised by that. But the other person that was being attacked was Vivek Ramaswamy. But he's clearly the biggest outsider in this race. And one of the things that they're trying to say about him as well, you don't have any experience. What kind of experience do you have? I mean, you've never been in elected office. As far as I'm concerned, that's a plus. Because all these career politicians, they got plenty of experience, the exact kind of experience we don't want, right? They have experience running up the debt, spending money, right? That's their experience. None of these career politicians did anything because the country is a disaster. I mean, they wanted to criticize the Biden economy, and obviously they're Republicans and Biden's a Democrat, but the economy didn't just get bad under Biden. It wasn't great under Trump either, as much as they want to pretend that it was. We've been in a decline for a long time. And both parties have blood on their hands as far as who's, been bludgeoning it to death. But Vivek Ramaswamy, he doesn't have any experience in Washington. And that's precisely why sending him to Washington makes more sense than sending these guys back to repeat the mistakes that they've already made. And Ramaswamy, again, his heart's in the right place. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. There's a lot of things that he says that I agree with. And in some cases, he's right about stuff, but not precisely for the right reasons. But he's on the right track. He understands, like Ronald Reagan, that the government is the problem, not the solution. The solution to the problem is getting rid of government, right? Limiting the size of government. He wants to do that. He wants to make government a lot smaller. He wants to cut spending. He wants to eliminate agencies and departments, and that's good. That's a positive thing. So people are criticizing this guy because he doesn't have enough experience. That's the best thing about him. He doesn't have experience wrecking the country.
Talked yesterday about Chris Christie and how he said, oh, Trump's a coward for not coming on and debating with us. Well, as usual, Chris Christie's political antennae are broken. And he was wrong because while they were, blathering about, let's put on that first clip, here's what was happening in the real world, i.e. the world of former Twitter, now X. And I just clipped this a little bit before the show started. 197.3 million views of Tucker Carlson interviewing President Trump in his little cabin, whatever it was. The most watched interview in the history of the world thus far. So sorry, Chris Christie, you got that wrong as usual. Trump felt like he didn't need to go on cable TV. He recognizes there are alternatives, and it turns out that his choice, of course, was the right choice in terms of reaching millions and millions of people.
In a way, Trump could look at it in a practical sense. Well, if I go there, are they going to change my opinion? if I go there, am I going to change their opinion?
Yeah.
Are they going to hate me less because I go there, or will they respect me more? And after what he's had to go through in the last couple of years, obviously, when you can get an audience like that, why bother? Why bother going there and playing those games? Because very much they are games that they play, and I think the part that annoys me the most, and yet this is what the people watch the most, is the yelling and shouting and so-called fighting. I've never got a big kick out of that because I don't think it accomplishes anything.
This is how things are changing, I think. A great progressive like Glenn, a maverick conservative like Gates talking about it. And what are they saying? They're saying, what on earth is going on? Poll after poll, and we talked about it so many times on the show, poll after poll shows that Americans, especially Republicans, especially conservatives, want nothing more to do with Ukraine, full stop. So why are these candidates up here saying, we need to do more for Ukraine? And Gates comes in, well, why is Congress ignoring the will of the American people, saying we need to do more for Ukraine? I think that was a great segment.
We've talked recently about the collusion between government and social media, but I think the collusion also goes to, cable, where they're going to spout a lot of government position. You take the war issue, for instance, and the welfare issue, and the Federal Reserve issue. They're not going to do it. This is why what's happening now with Twitter is very interesting, and thank goodness we still have enough freedom to find an alternative outlet. That doesn't mean we should be, casual about it and not think about it, because I think there will always, be a threat to this, because the people who are in charge of authoritarian government, they cannot stand the truth and they cannot stand competition. But so far, truth is winning a battle here and there.
Well, it wasn't only pandering on Ukraine that the Republicans did in their debate. There's also pandering on that same old thing, which is Israel. Let's put up that next clip. This is really interesting because this is a clip from it. We're not going to play the audio of it, but this is Nikki Haley. She says, it's not that Israel needs America, America needs Israel. And then Citizen Free Press says Nikki Haley is America last, to which Matt Walsh, who writes for the Daily Wire, which has been very friendly to Israel, obviously, he says this is an insane thing for a presidential candidate to say. The very definition of America last. And it's interesting because, she's attacking Ramaswamy, who basically, I think, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, but was taking more what I would consider a Ron Paul view, which is we should treat Israel like every other country. We don't need to send it billions. Treat it like a grown-up, the grown-up that it is, and let them do their own thing. Don't push them around, and don't send them a check. And, of course, everyone flipped out. But, this is nothing new. I remember back in '96 when Netanyahu first won. Now, he was a real maverick back then, and that was one of the planks in his platform. And I go back, I might be wrong slightly on the year, but I remember him saying, we don't want to have these strings attached to us by the U.S. We want to do our own thing. So it's nothing radical. It's nothing anti-Israel to say this, but Nikki Haley acted as if Ramaswamy just, burned an Israeli flag or something.
Yeah, and to me, the principle of trading with people and having a relationship with them, why can't that be with everybody other than those who, the extremists are starting bombing you for some reason?
Yeah,
I mean, there's always an end point, but for that part, and besides, there's no part of our Constitution that spelled it out the proper way. You take money from poor people in this country and give it to rich people around the world to fight their wars, and it hardly ever helps anybody except some of our corporate interests. The military-industrial complex. Just think of the Ukraine war. Has it really helped the Ukrainians? No, 400,000 killed, and it's the center of a world conflict right now that could get much worse. So this to me makes no sense whatsoever. So if you try to visualize, well, what would it be like if there was no empire like America to solve all these problems? Well, it's the empire that drives this thing. I think that's one of the things that especially some of the hockey, especially the strong hawks, is sort of a patriotic thing, that if you don't do it, I recall that when I was involved more directly in this, that not supporting the wars meant you were unpatriotic in some way, and you weren't supporting the troops, you weren't supporting the taxpayers, you weren't supporting the area of peace, and you've given up, and they've used all those wonderful reasons why you should have your blinders on, don't even think about it, continue with this aggravation and fighting that was liable to get out of hand. And right now, we're still on the verge of that. So I hope that between now and the election, there's a lot more common sense. Truth will win out. It just have to protect it and guide it. But that is the thing that the authoritarians hate the most. In an empire, truth becomes treasonous. So they rewrite the rules, and they continue to do that. But they cannot rewrite eternal rules. And I don't believe they can destroy all efforts by all people seeking and understanding what truth is really about, no matter how many times they recite their rituals.
Yeah.